It's almost impossible to talk about pop culture or, even the way modern movies are made without talking about the 1977 film Star Wars.
Absolutely. It's this massive cultural landmark. And you think about it, a film that cost $11 million, which was a lot for the mid-70s, but it was turned down by almost every major studio.
And the people actually working on it, for the most part, thought it was just this confusing kids' adventure. They were pretty sure it was going to fail.
But it didn't just succeed it was an explosion. It went beyond being a movie and became this permanent part of our global culture.
So today, we're not going to be following the plot. You already know the story of the Galactic Empire, Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia.
Right. Our goal here is to really explore the story behind the story. We're looking at that original 1977 film, the one later retitled A New Hope, as its own historical moment.
We want to understand where it came from, the incredible struggle to get it made, the technical breakthroughs that it forced into existence, and of course the legacy it left behind.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning, because it all comes from a place of, well, nostalgia for George Lucas.
Right. He didn't originally set out to build a whole new universe from scratch. His first idea was much simpler.
He wanted to adapt the Flash Gordon comics, the old serials he had loved when he was a kid.
That was the initial spark. He saw them as this kind of pure escapism.
But he couldn't get the rights. That deal fell through, so he had to pivot and develop his own space fantasy.
And what's so interesting is how he pulled from all these different influences. It wasn't just sci-fi.
No, he was drawing from classic adventure stories.
Yeah.
Things like Edgar Rice Burroughs' John Carter of Mars series, and even a much older book, Gulliver on Mars.
So it's this mix of pulpy science fiction, old adventure serials, and mythology. That was the foundation.
And his motivation, it wasn't about redefining cinema. It was something much more personal. He said he wanted to give young people an honest, wholesome fantasy life.
He felt that modern films were missing the romance, the adventure, and the fun.
Exactly. And that desire for pure, unironic fun, you can see it all through the writing process. But that process was grueling.
He started working on it full-time in early 1973, right after American Graffiti became a surprise hit.
And his first notes were incredibly dense. There was this 2-page synopsis called Journal of the Wills. It was a bit complicated.
It had these early characters like C.J. Thorpe and a Jedi named Mace Windu. He realized pretty quickly that this was probably too esoteric for a mainstream audience.
Which led him to the 13-page treatment in April '73 called The Star Wars.
And this is where we really start to see the structure take shape.
And where you can see the direct influence of one of his favorite filmmakers, Akira Kurosawa. Specifically, the 1958 film, The Hidden Fortress.
Lucas has always been open about that. He was using archetypes, blending these global influences with the structure of those old serials.
And the parallel with The Hidden Fortress is so clear. The entire story is seen through the eyes of two low-ranking, bumbling characters.
The two peasants in Kurosawa's film and C-3PO and R2-D2 in Star Wars, they're the ones who kind of accidentally move the plot forward.
He was trying to take this grand mythological story, but ground it with these relatable, almost funny characters. But the concepts, they went through so many changes over 4 different drafts.
Right. The first rough draft already had some huge elements, like the Sith and the Death Star, and a hero named General Anakin Starkiller.
And the characters were completely different. Han Solo was originally imagined as a big, green-skinned monster with gills.
It's amazing to see how things got simplified and streamlined. By the second draft in 1975, the pieces were starting to fit.
That draft was called Adventures of the Starkiller, Episode 1, The Star Wars.
So the Episode 1 title was there from very early on.
It was. And that draft gave us Luke Starkiller, the farm boy hero. It also had early versions of Han and Chewbacca. Chewbacca, famously, was based on Lucas's own dog, an Alaskan Malamute named Indiana.
And that second draft is also where the Force was really introduced, that sort of metaphysical heart of the story.
Right. Along with the idea of a great warrior who turns to the dark side. Lucas claimed he'd written a much longer version of the story, a whole trilogy.
But this is where the history gets a little complicated for us looking back.
It does, because those early scripts were clearly titled Episode 1. The film released in 1977 has no episode number at all.
The subtitle, Episode 4, A New Hope, wasn't added until the re-release in 1981.
Right. After The Empire Strikes Back was a huge success and proved that this saga idea could actually work.
So there's this tension there. Was it planned all along, or was it retroactively applied to make it feel bigger?
A lot of sources, including the producer Gary Kurtz, have disputed Lucas's claim that he had the whole trilogy mapped out. They point to those early
And
scripts.
Lucas himself even reportedly said in 2010 that when the first film came out, he didn't know where it was going either. He said the trick was to pretend you'd planned it all.
Which makes that edition of IV in 1981 just a brilliant piece of retroactive world building.
It transforms a hit movie into the middle chapter of an epic saga.
And even before they shot a single frame, that iconic opening crawl went through its own battle.
Lucas's original version was apparently very convoluted, 6 paragraphs long.
His friend, the director Brian De Palma, read it and just called it gibberish.
A pretty harsh but necessary critique.
We can thank De Palma and the screenwriter Jay Cox for helping edit that down to the clear, punchy 4 sentences we all know.
But even with a clearer opening, Lucas still had to find a studio that would take a chance on it.
And this was the era of serious, gritty filmmaking. Think Chinatown. A space opera just felt out of place.
The rejection list is famous. United Artists, Universal, Paramount, even Disney. They all said no.
It was 20th Century Fox that finally said yes in 1973. And the studio president, Alan Ladd Jr., later said he didn't really get the concept.
He was betting on Lucas.
Exactly. He said he believed in Lucas's talent because of American Graffiti. It was a bet on the director, not the script.
And the huge success of American Graffiti gave Lucas the leverage he needed in the negotiations.
Which led to what is maybe one of the most important business decisions in Hollywood history. He negotiated for control of the merchandising and sequel rights.
We have to stop and really emphasize how massive that was.
It completely changed the financial model of Hollywood. Before this, studios kept all that ancillary revenue from toys and books.
Lucas basically gambled on his own intellectual property. He took a lower director's fee in exchange for future revenue streams.
And that single decision created the modern franchise model that dominates movies today.
It's just staggering. He was betting on the story's longevity when the production itself was already struggling.
The budget kept climbing. It started at $5 million, went to $8 million, and ended up at $11 million because of all the delays and technical problems.
Which only made everyone more nervous. And that leads us right into the shoot itself, which was famously difficult.
It was just a marathon of things going wrong. They started filming in Tunisia in March of '76. That was for the desert planet, Tatooine.
And it was a disaster almost immediately. The heat and the sand were terrible for the technology.
Especially the droids. The radio-controlled R2-D2 models kept breaking down. The remote signals got interrupted. They basically had to push or pull the prac through the desert.
And then there was a rare winter rainstorm. It flooded the sets and just threw the schedule into chaos.
You really have to feel for them. This was not a smooth process. Anthony Daniels, who played C-3PO, actually injured his foot when part of his costume shattered. He was covered in scratches after his first day in that suit.
And the problems didn't stop in the desert. When they moved to the studios in London, there was a real morale problem.
Most of the British crew saw it as a silly children's film. They didn't take it seriously, which slowed everything down.
And Lucas himself was under immense pressure. He was known as being pretty shy and reserved.
He was more comfortable with small character dramas. This huge sci-fi production with a skeptical crew, plus strict British labor laws, it pushed him to his limit.
Carrie Fisher said his direction was usually just 2 words: faster and more intense.
The toll on him was huge. He was actually diagnosed with hypertension and exhaustion during the production. That's how much stress he was under.
The studio executives at Fox were getting extremely worried about the rising costs and the slow progress.
Eventually, Alan Ladd Jr. had to tell Lucas he had 1 week to finish principal photography, or they were shutting the whole thing down.
Wow. How did they do it?
They split the crew into 3 separate units, all working frantically at the same time. It's just incredible to think this massive franchise was born out of such a stressful, difficult shoot.
Given that chaos, it's a wonder they found the right people for these roles. So let's talk about the casting, because it was just as unconventional.
Well, Lucas had a very specific preference. He wanted to use unknown actors.
He wanted the film to feel fresh, more realistic in a way.
And that's exactly how we got the main trio.
It led to Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker and Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia. But you have to think about who they beat out for those roles.
Oh, the list is incredible. For Luke, there was Robert Englund, William Catt, even Kurt Russell.
And for Leia, Jodie Foster was considered, but she had a contract with Disney. Amy Irving was also in the running.
And then there's Han Solo. The casting of Harrison Ford is one of those great, almost accidental Hollywood stories.
Lucas didn't want him at first, specifically because he wasn't an unknown. He'd been in American Graffiti.
Ford was just there to help with auditions. He was reading lines with the other actors. But Lucas was eventually just won over by his presence.
His ability to deliver those cynical lines.
Exactly. And the list of actors considered for Han Solo is unbelievable. Al Pacino turned it down because he said he didn't understand the script.
Can you imagine Robert De Niro, Chevy Chase, Sylvester Stallone, a completely different movie?
Ford brought this reluctant, world-weary charm that just defined the character.
But with all these new faces, Lucas knew he needed a veteran to sort of anchor the film.
That's where Sir Alec Guinness came in as Obi-Wan Kenobi. Lucas had actually considered Peter Cushing for that role.
But he cast Cushing as the villain instead, as Grand Moff Tarkin.
And Guinness was critical. Even though he apparently disliked the dialogue and wanted his character killed off.
Which Lucas granted.
He did. But his presence on set inspired everyone. It made the rest of the cast and crew take the project more seriously.
And his financial deal was incredible. He negotiated for 2.25% of the film's back-end grosses.
The very smart move. It made him exceptionally wealthy for the rest of his life.
There was also a fascinating near-miss with the legendary Japanese actor Toshiro Mifune.
The star of so many of Kurosawa's films. He was considered for both Obi-Wan and Darth Vader.
But he turned them both down. His daughter later said he had this samurai pride and was worried the film would cheapen the image of samurai with what he assumed would be cheap special effects.
It just shows what a huge risk this felt like at the time. From his perspective, it was a gamble he wasn't willing to take.
Now, what about the droids? Their casting was much more about practicality.
Completely. Kenny Baker was cast as R2-D2 simply because of his height. He was 3'8", and he could fit inside the prop.
Though he turned it down a few times first.
And Anthony Daniels was drawn to C-3PO after seeing a concept painting by Ralph McQuarrie. He said he saw a vulnerability in the droid's expression.
And he actually won the voice role himself. He beat out over 30 other actors, including Mel Blanc, after he suggested to Lucas that he should just use his own voice.
The sound design for them became so iconic. For R2, Ben Burtt mixed together imitation baby noises, his own voice over an intercom, and synthesizer sounds.
And for Darth Vader, the physical performance was from David Prowse, a 6'6" weightlifter.
But Lucas felt his accent, a thick West Country English accent, just wasn't right for the villain.
So in comes James Earl Jones, that unforgettable booming voice.
And Jones wasn't even credited until 1983. He thought it was just a small voiceover job.
And the breathing sound is a great story. Ben Burtt created it by breathing through a scuba regulator mask.
And that sound is what inspired the idea that Vader was a burn victim who needed a life support suit. The sound design directly influenced the character's backstory.
Chewbacca was another practical choice. Peter Mayhew was cast because he was 7'3".
And he based his performance on watching animals at the zoo, trying to give Chewie that subtle, animalistic intelligence.
But the world they all lived in was almost a character itself. And it was a direct reaction against other sci-fi films.
Lucas completely rejected the clean, shiny future you see in films like 2001. He had one mandate. Nothing should look new.
He wanted a used future.
For credibility. He wanted the technology to feel lived in, functional, a bit beat up.
The production designers, John Barry and Roger Christian, ran with that. The rebel ships and locations all look cobbled together, which contrasts so well with the sleek, imposing designs of the Empire.
A perfect example is the inside of the Millennium Falcon. Roger Christian designed it to look like a submarine, and he built it using cheap airplane scrap metal and junk parts.
And the scale of this was just enormous. They used all 9 sound stages at Elstree Studios in London.
And for the huge Rebel hangar set, they had to use the massive stage at Shepperton Studios, which was the biggest in Europe at the time. It just gives you a sense of the immense logistical challenge.
So moving on, the technical innovations that Star Wars basically forced into being, this is where it becomes a true watershed moment for cinema.
It really is. I mean, Lucas had to create his own effects company, Industrial Light and Magic, or ILM.
Because Fox had just shut down its own in-house effects department.
So ILM starts up in a warehouse in California, and they almost immediately pioneer technology that changes the entire industry.
The Dextraflex system.
Developed by John Dykstra and his team, it was this new form of digital motion control photography, and it was absolutely essential for creating the illusion of size and scale.
Let's be clear why it was so revolutionary. It allowed them to use small models, but the camera could move along these precise programmable paths over and over again.
which was the only way to composite all the different elements of a space battle. You needed the camera to repeat the exact same movement, to layer in the ships, the background, the laser blasts. Modern effects are built on that foundation.
And visually, Lucas had this goal that seemed contradictory. He wanted the magical quality of a fairy tale, but with the gritty feel of a documentary.
Which is why he hired this cinematographer, Gilbert Taylor, who had shot films like Dr. Strangelove and 8 Hard Days Night.
Lucas loved that documentary flavor, but that preference led to a lot of friction on set.
A lot. Taylor and Lucas clashed over the lighting. Taylor felt Lucas was overstepping, and Lucas felt Taylor wasn't achieving the look he wanted.
It got to the point where Taylor had to literally break open the walls and floors of the sets just to get enough light in there.
It was a constant struggle. And speaking of technology, the very first use of CGI in the film is so subtle you could easily miss it.
The Death Star plans.
Exactly. The little animated blueprint that R2-D2 is carrying,
Yeah.
that was the only digital computer animation in the original film.
Meanwhile, the actual explosion of the Death Star was a completely practical effect.
And a very inventive one. They filmed a bunch of miniature bombs made of black powder, gasoline, and napalm, pointing a high-speed camera straight up at the explosion.
You really can't discuss the film's legacy without talking about the music. The score is just a masterpiece.
It is. And Lucas's first idea was to use pre-existing classical music.
But John Williams convinced him that an original score would be more powerful.
And he then created what the American Film Institute later called the greatest film score of all time. The main title theme was heavily influenced by the score for a 1942 film called King's Row. It links it back to those sweeping adventure films of Hollywood's golden age.
And he recorded the whole thing with the London Symphony Orchestra in just 12 days.
Incredible efficiency. And the final layer to all this is the web of allusions and references Lucas wove into the story. We've mentioned Kurosawa.
Right. Beyond the hidden fortress, the cantina brawls feels a lot like scenes from Yojimbo.
And there's a scene in Kurosawa's film Senjuro where characters hide under the floorboards, which is echoed perfectly when they hide in the Millennium Falcon.
The film also owes a huge debt to World War II movies.
Specifically the 1955 film The Dam Busters. The climax of Star Wars, the trench run on the Death Star, is a direct visual parallel to the climax of that film.
And Lucas even used clips of actual WWII dogfights as inspiration for the ILM effects team. He wanted them to capture that speed and movement.
And to top it off, Gilbert Taylor, the cinematographer on Star Wars, had also filmed the effects for The Dam Busters.
Another big comparison is with Frank Herbert's Dune novels.
There are a lot of similarities. Desert planets, a reference to spice, moisture farmers.
Herbert himself noted about 16 points of identity between the two universes. Whether it was conscious or not, Lucas was pulling from this incredibly rich literary and cinematic history.
So now we get to the release. And the immediate impact was just a shock to everyone, especially given all the chaos behind the scenes.
The studio had so little faith in it, the release was really hesitant.
They actually bundled it with another movie, The Other Side of Midnight. They forced theaters to show Star Wars if they wanted to get the other, more anticipated film.
It opened quietly on May 25th, 1977, in just 32 theaters.
And it just exploded. In 6 months, it passed Jaws to become the highest-grossing film in North American history.
The financial impact was immediate. Fox's stock price doubled in 3 weeks.
And the fan phenomena was just as fast. The producer, Gary Kurtz, said he knew something was different when he was on a radio show, and a caller was talking about having already seen the movie 4 times.
That level of repeat viewing was just not a thing back then.
And adjusted for inflation, it's still the second highest-grossing film ever in North America, right behind Gone with the Wind.
But the critical reaction was not universally positive. It really split the establishment.
On one hand, you had critics like Roger Ebert, who called it an out-of-body experience. Vincent Canby at the New York Times called it the most beautiful movie serial ever made.
But other critics, the ones who valued the more sophisticated films of the 70s, they struggled with it.
Pauline Kael complained that it had no emotional grip. John Simon called the story and characters overwhelmingly banal.
It really highlighted this massive divide in what people thought movies should be.
And there was also a social critique that emerged almost right away. We should be clear that we're just reporting what the sources say here.
In 1978, the scientist Carl Sagan and the actor Raymond St. Jacques both pointed out the overwhelming whiteness of the human characters.
They raised the concern that there were no significant minority characters in this vision of the future. Critic Walter Bremen took it a step further, focusing on Darth Vader.
He claimed that Vader, dressed in black and voiced by a black actor, James Earl Jones, reinforced the stereotype that black is evil. He called it one of the most racist movies ever produced.
Lucas was reportedly surprised by this. He had modeled the Empire on the Nazis and saw it as a simple good versus evil story. The critique also mentioned the droids being sold like slaves and kicked out of the cantina, seeing it as an allusion to racial discrimination. It's important to acknowledge that complex initial reaction.
Moving on to the long-term legacy, Star Wars, along with Jaws a couple of years earlier, completely reshaped Hollywood.
It marked the definitive start of the blockbuster era. The industry's focus shifted away from the personal, auteur-driven films of the early 70s.
Films like The Godfather or Taxi Driver.
And moved toward these big-budget spectacles aimed at younger audiences, all driven by merchandising and sequels.
And that change caused a huge debate. Some critics said Lucas and Spielberg had ruined Hollywood by focusing on spectacle over substance.
Others saw it as a rebirth. Critic Tom Schoen argued they plugged cinema back into its roots as a carnival sideshow, injecting new energy into the industry.
And that used future aesthetic had a massive impact. You can see its influence in Alien, in Blade Runner, in The Terminator.
And beyond the screen, it created a new model for how audiences engage with a film, all thanks to merchandising.
Which is funny because there was almost no merchandise available when the film first came out.
Only one company, Kenner Products, had taken the licensing deal. So when the film became a phenomenon, they couldn't meet the demand for the Christmas season in '77.
Their solution became a retail legend, the empty box campaign.
They sold a box that was just a voucher, the Star Wars Early Bird Certificate package. It promised you would get 4 action figures sometime the next year.
And it worked. That empty box was the most popular toy of the season. It sold entirely on anticipation. The figures themselves are now in the National Toy Hall of Fame.
Other tie-ins were just as important. The novelization sold 500,000 copies before the movie was even released.
And the Marvel Comics adaptation was so successful that it apparently single-handedly saved Marvel from bankruptcy.
The film's penetration into the culture is just total. Phrases like evil empire and may the force be with you are part of our lexicon.
There's an unofficial holiday, May the 4th, based entirely on a pun from that quote.
One source argued that you could basically recreate the entire film just from all the parodies and references in other media over the years.
And the official accolades were huge. 6 Academy Awards, BAFTAs, a Golden Globe, Grammys.
And in 1989, it was selected for the National Film Registry, marking it as culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant.
We should also mention the 1981 radio drama. It had Mark Hamill and Anthony Daniels reprising their roles, and it included scenes that were cut from the film, giving fans a deeper look.
Which brings us to the last and maybe most contentious part of its legacy, the evolution of the film itself.
The re-releases. In 1981, they officially added the subtitles Episode 4 and A New Hope to fit it into the timeline with The Empire Strikes Back.
That was Lucas future-proofing his story, retroactively. But the huge change came in 1997 with the special edition.
He believed digital technology, after seeing Jurassic Park, had finally caught up to his original vision.
So he went back and added new scenes, cleaned up the visuals, and made digital alterations. But many fans and critics felt he degraded the film.
The biggest controversy, of course, was the change to the scene with Han Solo and Greedo.
In the original film, Han shoots first. It establishes him as a cynical, quick-on-the-draw scoundrel.
In the 97 version, Greedo shoots first, and Han is just reacting in self-defense. This sparked the fan outcry, Han shot first. It became a symbol of fan resistance to the changes.
Part of the difficulty in preserving the original is technical. The 1977 print used a type of film stock that deteriorated very quickly, so a lot of restoration was needed just for the 97 version.
And because there hasn't been an official release of the theatrical cut since the early 80s, fans have taken it upon themselves to create their own restorations.
But there is good news on that front. The original print was screened in 2025 for the first time in decades, and a newly restored version of the 77 theatrical cut is set for re-release in 2027 for the 50th anniversary.
It's just incredible when you step back and look at it. A film that came from such low expectations and a stressful production became this cultural juggernaut that changed everything about how movies are made and consumed.
It really is more than just a movie. It's a historical turning point. And its constant evolution leaves us with this really interesting question. What is the original historical document of this moment?
Is it the deteriorating 1977 print? Is it the version with the title change from 1981? Or is it the version the creator himself says is his definitive vision?
A question that's hard to answer.
It is, a question worth thinking about every time you hear that opening music.
Indeed.
Thanks for listening.